I know you talked about this already yesterday, but I'd like to come back to it because it's a little bit mind-boggling to me. Since when is a UN resolution, a Security Council UN resolution, not non-binding? Because that's a significant shift. That's not the understanding of most countries, and it's not the understanding of the UN either. This is not a Chapter 7 resolution. So I don't get how the U.S. is now saying that it would be non-binding and basically giving the message that another country wouldn't necessarily need to comply with it.
So let me explain what we meant by that. First of all, as we said yesterday, and we made clear all along, we have always believed that the path to a ceasefire and the release of hostages is something that will be reached through negotiations between Israel and Hamas, enabled by third-party countries, and in which the United States is participating, and not through a UN process, and that remains our belief. Nevertheless, when we say the resolution is non-binding, what we mean is that it does not impose any new obligations on the parties, the way, for example, some UN resolutions that impose obligatory sanctions, impose actual requirements on people to implement them. That said, we do believe that even though there are this resolution lacks non-binding provisions and lacks new requirements that it is imposed on the parties, it does carry weight, and it is something that should be implemented.
But, I mean, that's a little bit contradictory, if I may. I mean, either it's binding or it's non-binding. If it's non-binding, like you said, because it lacks provisions, why would anybody comply with it?
It's non-binding in that it does not impose any new obligations on the parties, but we do believe it should be respected, that it carries weight, and that it should be implemented, as has always been the case, has always been our belief when it comes to UN Security Council resolutions.
Sure. Okay. So, if this was non-binding, now the other resolutions, the 3 resolutions that you vetoed, were they also in the same kind of resolution?
So, Saeed, I'd have to go back and look at the provisions of those, but we vetoed them. So ultimately, they weren't the voice of the UN Security Council.
I'm saying if they are not binding, then why bother and veto it?
Because they carry weight and should be implemented, and so we want to see resolutions that pass ultimately reflect the policy positions of the United States, which is what I said yesterday. We came to the determination that this Security Council resolution, although it did contain, or it lacked some provisions that we wanted to see, most notably condemning Hamas's actions on October 7th, that it called for 2 things that we support, a ceasefire and the release of hostages together. And so that's why we abstained from the resolution. We do believe that it carries weight and should be implemented.
Mm-hmm. But you know, and I remember like during the whole Iraq thing, there were 12 UN resolutions, and they were all binding. They were all binding every time, and the U.S. would be the first one to say it's binding. I mean, I worked in Iraq. I know exactly what was going on. So I'm saying that any UN resolution that passes, that is allowed to pass, is potentially can be utilized within the framework of Chapter 7.
Is there a question there, Saeed?
Yes, it is. I'm asking you. I mean, can you answer?
No, it was a statement. I want to see if there's actually a question.
So, okay, let me reframe my question. Do you think that this resolution can potentially be subject to Chapter 7?
We believe that the UN Security Council resolution carries weight and should be respected, as I said.
Okay. I have a couple of other questions, but I'll defer to others.